to Gerald, Jerry Lawson, Videogame legend. This is a panel about this man, father of the Videogame cartridge, and his life, his work, and how that life and work reflects on contemporary African-American experience in studies. So I hope you'll enjoy it. My name is Dr. Mirowski. I'm a recent PhD graduate from Indiana University. I'm a historian of video games, and I am interested currently in infrastructure, the technology around you, lights, water, sound, the technology that makes things work. And let me tell you, as someone who's also in charge of the educational symposium here in MAGFest, with Javon and one other, infrastructure is everything. You would not believe the random things that are sort of falling apart in the background that you guys don't have to worry about, that we have to worry about to make sure you guys have a good time. So it's always exciting.
And I'm Javon Goard. I am a PhD student at Johns Hopkins University. I am also a video game researcher. Alex and I went to the school together at Duke. He got his degree at IU. I'm still working on mine somewhere else. But I study the African American experience and also digital representation in games as well. But I've also done some stuff related to video game trailers as well as just esports, representation, blackness within esports as well. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, thank you for coming. I have to dual wield, so forgive me. Jay is sensible, he just sits down and I wander around while I lecture, so just be prepared for that. So, this is Gerald, Jerry Lawson. We're also both pretty excited teachers. That was a big part of our grad studies, which means that we like to make things interactive. So if you have questions at any point, feel free to raise your hand and we'll just pause and answer them. But that also means that we get to ask questions of all of you on this Thursday night. So the first question is, Jerry Lawson, how many of you have heard of this man before? Okay, most of you, good. Can I ask someone who very valiantly raised their hand, what have you heard about this man? Sure.
That he invented the video game cartridge.
Okay. It's actually not technically true, but it's close. He certainly was the brains behind getting it mass-produced and effective. Yeah, gentleman in the back.
Actually, I thought I heard that he was the first African American to create a console.
Yep, that is true. Anyone else? Sure, gentleman in the back and then in the front.
He designed the Fairchild channel.
Yes, indeed, which I was so excited to say, and after our presentation, you can go across the hall to the museum and see one, but it's not his. So you can't. However, I would encourage you to at least, after the presentation, see if the museum has any old documents related to it, maybe a game, maybe a pamphlet or something. It was sort of a juicy machine. Gentlemen in front.
Oh, well, he did tech support when it launched because nobody else was in the office to do it.
Yes, does that mean you've read a particular interview?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I'll reference that today. Very funny story, which I'll share with the group. Okay, so yeah, broadly, he is known as the father of the video game cartridge, a type of media that we all know and love if you have played any number of video game consoles from, say, several decades at least. But the reason why we start the presentation with this picture is because that is in fact not the whole story. It is an important part of this story, but Lawson actually was quite a bit more than simply the video game cartridge, simply the Channel F. The first time we gave this presentation was back in 2019 before the pandemic. We were really excited to give it because back then when you did a Google image search of Jerry, you got something like this. Anyone want to tell me not what's wrong with the picture, but why I even put it up on the slides?
It's all the same picture.
Yeah, right? Like, except for this one, it's literally the same picture that I just showed you. Just, copied, for better, for worse, photocopied, etc. The bottom line was there actually wasn't a lot about him out there on the internet, despite the fact that he was really freaking cool. Like, aside from the cartridge stuff, like, this guy was a brilliant engineer. He was a trailblazer. He also had a really cunning sense of humor. Like, he passed, unfortunately, in 2011. This is a guy I would have wanted to meet and sit down with and have lunch with, right? Like, he was just a good guy and a brilliant technical mind. Now, if you Google him today, thankfully things are a little different. So this was a search I did earlier this week. You can see on the right here, we still have those same pictures. Although the addition of, yes, a Google Doodle in honor of Jerry Lawson, which was published on his birthday, December 1st, 2022. And I encourage you, if you have time, when you go home, when you're in your home, whatever, just pull it up. All the previous Google Doodles are available. There's a short little game in there, and then you can kind of create your own game as well. It's fun, it's informative. Although actually, as a professional historian, I still think it's missing some things. But as a way to kind of drum up interest and like kind of bring him out of the dust of the past, I think it does a really good job. And that actually motivated other people to write about him and learn about him. So this is, if you scroll down on this page, you can see a number of these articles were published since that 2022 date, talking about his contributions, right? Forgotten innovator, his game-changing work. As much as the cartridge thing we'll get to, it's a little more complicated, he still played a critical role. Actually, all this is true. Like, he did a lot in his career, especially as a black man in nascent Silicon Valley, where it wasn't very easy to be a black man in nascent Silicon Valley, but he did. I'd like to focus on this tagline here. This actually isn't an article about our Jerry Lawson. This is about Jerry Lawson, the lead man of Persuasions. But the title is Just a Mortal Man. And I want to focus on that for a moment, because that's actually kind of what we would like to portray tonight. It's not Jerry Lawson, the legend who made the cartridge, because again, legends are often not entirely accurate. They're about these larger-than-life people that we can maybe aspire to be but can't relate to. But actually, a lot of his work is very relatable. A lot of his life is very relatable, and that's hopefully what we can present to you tonight, right? Jerry Lawson, the larger-than-life guy, but still a guy. Someone, hopefully, that we can learn a few things from and can remember fondly. So that's his presentation. If you want an exhaustive history of his life, those have actually been written online. There are a couple of really good ones. The interview that I asked the gentleman up front about, I'll be referencing. A historian of technology and journalist named Ben Edwards managed to catch Lawson a couple years before his death and just did like the best interview. Like it's from the man himself. So if you want to learn about him, his words are there. I'll show you a link. We're not going to cover all of that tonight, but I'll tell a few stories. What we want to do again is just talk about Lawson as a good guy, an excellent engineer, and someone who forged a path in a place that was not very hospitable to an intelligent black man. So that takes us back to this picture. And we are going to be talking about why his race was relevant, both of us. Because in fact, this picture, the one that is omnipresent in those Google image searches, is from a magazine called Black Enterprise. This was from an article about Lawson as an African-American entrepreneur, as a guy who was trying to forge that path when not a lot of other people were able to. Black Enterprise is still around today. Its readership is somewhere in like the 3.5 millions, so it's still pretty popular. But this article went into depth about Lawson's experience, not just as an innovator, although of course you'll notice in this picture we do have that Channel F there, there's an Atari here, a Magnavox TV, right? He's surrounded by technology, but the focus all is on him. As we discussed tonight, we'll focus on how his blackness informed his career choices, because there were walls that he had to overcome, some of which successfully, some of which meant that he had to sort of change course in his life. In that article I just showed you, he said it straight, right? A feeling among whites is that blacks cannot handle the higher levels of the corporate structure. Too many times we get stuck in middle management. Being on your own, that is leaving a big company and sort of starting your own company, being an entrepreneur, means eliminating those problems in politics. And that's in fact what Lawson had to do. This is from that interview I told you about, so here's the link. I'll have a screenshot of it later, but as long as you like Google Lawson interview Ben Edwards, you'll get there. Strong recommend for a read. So Ben asks, how were the job prospects for a black engineer in those days? Did your race affect that in any way? And Jerry was a straight shooter. He's like, oh yeah, always did, of course, right? Could be both plus or minus. Where it could be a plus is that in some regard you had a lot of eyes watching you. And as a result, if you did good, you did twice as good because you got instant notoriety about it. So obviously there's a lot wrapped up in here, and there's a lot we can say is still problematic about having to work in a space that requires this kind of like pedestal status, right? But it's what Lawson was dealing with at the moment. And so we're going to talk about a concept that Javon will explain for us, black joy, which we think is illustrated by Lawson's life. Because he did in fact find happiness and resistance in pursuing his career in technology, which again was a career that was largely inaccessible to most black identified people at the time. You know, he got there where a lot of others didn't, and as long as one person does, you can set an example. And I think Lawson did. Quickly then, this is that interview I was talking about from Videogame and Gaming. I pull a couple stories from this because Lawson told great stories, and I like telling great stories, so I'm going to tell you his stories. But in addition to that, I also did some archival research at 2 places, and I'd like to just do a quick shout out to them because they are very kind in letting researchers like me come in and look at old papers, which I think is the greatest thing on earth, and most of you would be like, oh, documents. Can I? No. So this is the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. Anyone ever been there? Heard of it? Yeah, okay, a couple of you. Awesome. It is a place devoted to fun, and you don't have to be a kid to go there. Although if you go there, you might discover that you are still a kid. They also have archives in addition to a museum space. And so I was able to look at the Jerry Lawson collection. It's a collection of his papers, engineering documents, other materials from his life that are available for viewing if you sign up to make an appointment. And then I also went to the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, where there is a collection of Fairchild documents. So Jerry Lawson worked at Fairchild Camera and Instruments. You may also know it as Fairchild Semiconductor. And there's a little bit there about his work, although it's not as focused as a collection devoted entirely to him. But anyway, I just want to say a quick thank you to Bench, to the Strong, and to the Computer History Museum. It really is invaluable to be able to get those materials and bring them to all of you so that we can talk about the life of this amazing person. Well, first, if we're going to be talking about how Jerry Lawson's life embodies black joy, right, this kind of sense of resistance against white hegemony, well, we better operationalize that term. And for that, before I get into all those documents that you're really going to love, I'm going to turn it over to Jay.
All right, thank you, Alex. There we go. All right, so Jerry Lawson's legacy should be a reminder to us all that creativity happens in the most intriguing of ways. Lawson's creative freedom was expressed through his invention. Lawson was born in 1940 and passed in 2011, so he lived through times of war abroad and also great times of racial upheaval. I argue that it's still happening at this very moment. Simply the names and the degree of the tension has shifted some. And so, while I'm sure Lawson had his moments, as Alex mentioned, he did have his moments of reflecting on the state of America, he persevered. He kept doing what he did best, was to invent, to think. And honestly, that's what black people do, right? We continue to persevere in the most hardest of circumstances, right? And part of that perseverance comes into a form called black joy. So, now black joy has a myriad of different definitions, which I'll get into shortly. But one of the major underpinnings of black joy is that it's this mode of resistance. So from unarmed black folks of all genders and hues being slain by law enforcement to educational opportunities being stripped away due to a blatant disregard of what affirmative action actually is, right? Black folks have formulated a form of resistance against various hegemonic forces and racism by uplifting, cultivating, and bringing to the fore positive, expressive actions better known as black joy. Black joy is a form of positively expressive behaviors and actions not only existing because it's in contention with some form of opposition, but simply a state of being. In this context, joy is framed as a strategy, a toolkit, and a mindset. Are you following me this far? So, does this work? Yes. So what you see here is, let's try it again. There we go. So what you see here is just various ways in which people depict their own sense of black joy, right? It's not only just about images, this is also about music, it's about jewelry making, it's about acting, right? It comes in all forms of creative expression. So the term has been widely used in social media and academic resources and popular online periodicals, including the hashtag Black Joy, which is also quite prevalent on things like X, Twitter, whatever Elon's calling it, Instagram, Pinterest, showcasing black folks displaying certain kinds of actions that are deemed entertaining worthy of praise and adulation. Here I reference Reverend Roderick Greer, entitled Black Joy is Black Resistance. In it, he says, Black joy dances in the face of armed officers, sings in the presence of death, and shouts down systems of terror. Black joy is the spirit of liberation that inhabits black bodies in church services, defying order of rows of pews for spontaneous joy. Greer also importantly links black joy to its oppositional relationship to white supremacy, confirming that while the history of white supremacy is long and triumphant, white supremacy itself is not the last word, joy is. As Reverend Greer connects black joy to the black church, he views this as also a tool for thriving within an oppressive system. Relatedly, the tradition of black lyricism, as Jessica H. Liu and Catherine Knight Steele point out in one of their articles, is that it is a method of black folks speaking and acting in a ways that the dominant group would not understand to express certain joy, or express the joy. For example, slaves speaking in ways, right, coded messages for revolt. Here I have a piece by Hadia Rodrigue in their piece called The Case for Black Joy. In it, she simply says, simply put, black joy is the unabashed enjoyment of black culture without apology, hesitancy, or shame. Furthermore, Rodrigue states black joy is also rare because the mainstream media would rather focus on black pain. In the age of near instant information sharing, black pain is always within the news. And though I agree with Rodrigue to some degree, I also disagree that black joy is rare. I don't believe that. It's most likely that we are not fully exploring the myriad of spaces, sites, and communities within pockets of marginal and mainstream culture. Javon Johnson, and he has a brilliant first name, just saying. Dr. Javon Johnson, who teaches at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, he expounds upon the possibility of finding black joy in unlikely spaces in his article called Black Joy in the Time of Ferguson. Johnson frames black joy as an epistemology or theory/method that is not only about enduring certain struggles. As Johnson explains, black joy allows us space to stretch our imaginations beyond what we previously thought possible and allows us to theorize a world in which white supremacy does not dictate our everyday lives. Black joy, as a tool of resistance, is expressed via the practice of one's devotion to their religious affiliation. The resistant act being black folks focusing on communing with each other, which allows for moments of peace and liberation away from white supremacy. Black joy takes root in communal spaces, such as gaming spaces, when the organizational structure uplifts and nurtures black thought and creative expression. Johnson discusses venues in which black folks commune to celebrate, such as house parties, backyard cookouts. I argue the skating rink. This is actually my little brother. Other venues, right, such as the church, and burgeoning spaces such as the annual BlurCon that is held in Crystal City, Virginia. So again, Johnson leaves it with, I firmly believe that black bodies harbor knowledge, and in these moments, every smile, head nod, hip shake, and high five is an exchange of embodied truths that black joy is phenomenally transformational.
And that transformation for Lawson was often technological in nature. Right at the end of, oops, that's a button, there we go. Right at the end of this next section that I'll share with you, we'll talk a little bit about some of his creative pursuits outside of an engineering lab, outside of his garage where he had every possible early personal computing device you might imagine available to tinker with. But fundamentally, this was a life where Lawson took joy in his work. He is survived by his wife and 2 children, In a video that I'll show you a picture of the video, not the video itself, sorry. His daughter talks about how for him, the work was its own reward. Like Lawson wasn't doing this because he wanted to get rich. He wasn't doing this because he wanted to get famous. He was doing it because he liked it and he was good at it and he wanted to see what he could do with it, right? The project mattered and that was his joy. So we're going to talk about him with a few different hats. First, primarily as engineer. A lot of you said, okay, yeah, he made the first video game console with a cartridge, right? Again, mostly correct. He was very technically minded from an early age. At age 13, he built his own ham radio out of parts that his pocket money was able to get him from various stores nearby in Brooklyn, where he was born in 1940. He studied electronics at Queens College and City College of New York, and so had some academic background as well. And then went out west and in, again, that nascent Silicon Valley era, worked at a variety of different electronics and engineering companies, many in aerospace. For those of you who don't know, before Silicon Valley was known for big tech companies, Silicon Valley, that part of California, was actually big in aerospace. And there are still some companies still there. Northrop Grumman is still there. Lockheed Martin is still there. But before it was computers, it was aircraft. It was military tech. It was NASA. And so Lawson got his start, actually, in the engineering field working at such a company. And in fact, Fairchild, the company that made the Channel F, also started off as a military company. They made spy cameras for military aircraft as Fairchild Camera before they were Fairchild Camera and Instrument. But for Lawson, pet projects kind of were his bread and butter. So obviously he had his day jobs, but that wasn't enough. That wasn't going to satisfy his mind when it came to tinkering. And so inspired by one of the first video game arcade cabinets, Computer Space. Anyone heard of Computer Space? Yeah? Someone who's heard of it, you want to describe what it looks like? I know it's a weird question, but like, what is the console? Yeah, what does it look like?
Oh, the console itself?
Yeah, the actual like arcade. Yeah. So, I mean, if anyone has their phones readily available, I would encourage you to like Google image search it if you're curious. So it's sort of futuristic looking. It's sleek. Nolan Bushnell of Atari made it, and it kind of flopped. Turns out it was just too much too soon. The game itself is very complicated. I think we might have one here, I hope, in the arcade. If not, then I must have played it at the Strong. But I tried playing it, and it was like, oh, this is weird. I've heard stories about Computer Space was like it just failed as a game. I don't know why. 2 minutes later, Jesus Christ, this is awful. No, I understand why no one played this. I don't know what's going on. I think I'm dead. I think I've respawned. I think I'm dead again. It just, Pong. Pong was the future because it was simple. But Lawson wanted to make his own. He saw Computer Space and didn't think, well, this sucks. He said, no, I can do it better. And he did. In his garage, he actually made his own full-size arcade game called Demolition Derby. And as he was at Fairchild at the time, some of his coworkers at Fairchild caught wind of the fact that he just made his own game cabinet and said, okay, hold on a second. We have a project for you. We need someone who knows games, and you clearly do. So again, it's that kind of free-thinking hobbyist spirit that actually starts being swept up into some of his more professional work. When he finally retired, he actually went back into aerospace and helped to train satellite engineers at Stanford in the 90s. So throughout his life, a dedication to innovation, experimentation, that was his joy, right? Putting things together, taking them apart, figuring out how to put them together better. One of the things he put together was this sort of space age, you could call it sort of a professional RV. So when he was at Fairchild, he was offered two initial positions. One was to go into marketing behind a desk somewhere deep in the Fairchild building, and he hated that idea. And the other was to do something that no one had ever done before. And if you take one thing away tonight about Lawson, yeah, he made the first video game console with a cartridge, but that first part is actually more important. For Lawson, it was about doing something that no one had done before, trying to get it right, forging new ground, right? That was what was joyful for him. And in this case, he was told, look, Fairchild makes complicated electronics, and it turns out our customers don't know how to use them very well, and will often either return them or call and complain about them. And that's bad for business. So what they said for him to do was could you take the tech support to them? It's sort of like marketing, but it's more like just taking care of our customers. He said, sure, that sounds interesting. So he designed what he described as sort of a James Bond style like battle bus, which had a bunch of tech inside it. I'm assuming everyone's familiar with like books on wheels, libraries on wheels. This was like one of those, but for all of the complicated gizmos that your company ordered that no instruction manual came with. And so you would take this thing out on the road, an applications van as it was called, and actually it was a huge hit. It was a big success. He was very charismatic, very, very convincing, or very friendly. And so he went out with these application vans that he designed from top to bottom. He said they had like, a projection screen that came down behind it, and apparently like the rear differential axle was taken from like a Bradley tank or something for like extra structural support. Like he did all sorts of crazy things with it. And so eventually he was asked to make more of these things because it was successful. And so he got sort of a reputation in the company as a problem solver, as a doer, as someone who, if you gave him a novel project, he'd actually get the thing done. Although sometimes he encountered problems. So one of those stories I was going to tell you about from the excellent interview was he had the newest applications van, again, this sort of James Bond style, very advanced, giant gizmo on wheels. And his daughter came with him and said, hey, Dad, I want to ride in the cool van. And he said, sure, we'll take it out. So brand new, takes it out on the highway, starts running it down the road, sets cruise control, right? That was novel. You could actually set cruise control on this thing and just focus on how you're going to teach people how to use the tech. And then he comes to a traffic light, and it turns red, and he presses the brakes. And it keeps on cruising forward. And he presses the brakes again, and it keeps on going forward. And it turns out, he discovers that the cruise control system has locked the accelerator. There's just no stopping it. He slams on the brakes, he puts on the parking brake. He made this thing really powerful. It overpowers the brakes and continues onwards, such that he's thinking, okay, I just need to pick which vehicle to rear end now. But ever the canny problem solver, he decides, wait a minute, God gave me these. So he jams his hand up inside the steering column, wrenches out a bunch of wires, and kills the cruise control. And then comes to a gentle stop, and it's like nothing ever happened. So he obviously complained constantly to the people who engineered it, but that's the kind of guy he was, right? High-tech solutions, low-tech solutions, but always technological solutions. So that was pre-Channel F. And then we get to the machine itself. Again, I'm disappointed that I can't, have everyone walk over afterwards and take a look at it. It was actually pretty clever. One of the main reasons why having a cartridge that looked like this was valuable was because home consoles didn't really sell very effectively before that because they only came with like 4 games. And as someone who has more Steam games that are unplayed in his library, probably than most of you, although maybe some of you are thinking, oh no, Alex, get ready, I have more. It turns out you want new games a lot, right? You kind of get bored with the same old thing, give it to your kids as a present. They've played the game so much more than you'd expected. You want something new. But that wasn't possible for all these home consoles until the idea came not to Fairchild, actually, and not to Lawson, but to a different company called Alpex Computer Corporation. And there were 2 guys at Alpex who are tangentially relevant to the story as to how they relate to Lawson. So if you're looking for more on the Fairchild itself, apologies, we don't have time for that. There is good information on the internet also by Benj Edwards if you're really curious. But those 2 guys had an idea to make something like this, but they didn't know how to make it practical and mass producible and reliable. So Fairchild was brought in to help swap out some of the internal componentry to make it more reliable, and Lawson was brought in to help those guys do it because, again, someone caught wind of the fact that Lawson had made a video game arcade. And early executives at companies that wanted to be in games but weren't in games didn't know games, so they needed to find someone in their organization who did. And in this case, it was Lawson. So he's brought in and he helps them to solve a few problems. The most immediate, he said, was that thing could explode. And it turns out he was right that it could explode. Because what you're doing when you have this cartridge installed is you've just got a couple ROM chips here on the cart, right? It's not that complicated, that have the actual game instructions with circuitry that lets it connect into the microprocessor, which will do the thinking and decision making for the game. But the issue was you're effectively connecting a circuit to another circuit, and these things had never seen each other before. So he was worried that the semiconductors in here could actually explode due to excessive electrical buildup if you didn't properly ground them and didn't solve a few other technological problems that even I couldn't necessarily explain to you looking over his notes. But solve them he did, right? I played on my N64, and I liked my Pokemon Snap, and Electabuzz did not explode me when I tried to load the game. But this project was pretty crucial for Fairchild. They made an entire new games division. They put Lawson in charge of it. He was the first employee of their games division, and he recruited other people into that. But the Channel F was going to be a game changer for them, right? Video games were very popular. Games were starting to move from arcades into the home, and Fairchild wanted to be a part of that. And they thought this kind of revolutionary, interchangeable, versatile cartridge system would be a game changer. And of course, with hindsight, we all know that it was, just not for Fairchild. And there are some reasons for that, which are also sort of outside the scope of this, right? Lawson wasn't in charge of every part of the project, although it seems he was genuinely disappointed and disheartened when the console didn't take off like it could. It released soon before the crash of 1983, which some of you might know about if you're into video game history. There were production problems, there were some market factors at play with how Fairchild sourced the actual components for this thing, which just meant that it was a little too expensive. I saw an ad for this thing which said that like in 1976 it was $195, which is like, that's a Switch. You know, that's almost a Switch. And this is in like 1976 dollars. So it just wasn't economical. The technology was there, but not quite. The games that were built for it were engaging, but not quite as much as what Atari could make with the 2600 home console, which was released just a year after this and kind of blew the Channel F out of the water. But it was still a technological marvel. Even the controllers. So these actually have a ludicrous amount of degrees of freedom for like early analog joystick controllers, and they were actually Lawson's brainchild. He came up with the prototype for these. He was very excited about it. And lest you think that because this looks simple, it means the controllers were also simple, they were not. This is the original patent application for the controller. I don't know how to read patents, but I can read sort of basic designs. And yeah, this is actually not Lawson's original prototype, which was even more complicated. This is the trimmed down, mass-producible version that some of his coworkers made. So his design was like properly revolutionary, but arguably the market wasn't quite ready for it. But still, these are some of the things he did at Fairchild. He wasn't like the guy who came up with the idea of using the cartridge, but he did take that idea and run with it and make something that no one else had made before, which was a machine that could run these games reliably. Again, if the museum were there, you could have gone and played the thing today, right? Like, they've been holding up, it works. And as we all know, cartridge-based game consoles did take off, right? For a very long time, they were the market standard. So what did he do after the Channel F kind of fell apart? Well, he stayed at Fairchild for a couple more years, but it wasn't quite the same. You know, the big promise of the Channel F and this whole games industry for Fairchild didn't pan out. And as I described right at the beginning, Lawson was encountering some of that latent racism at his workplace, right? He felt like he was kind of hitting a ceiling. He wasn't able to do as much as he wanted to in a predominantly white office. So he went for it on his own. This is Videosoft, the engineering company that he himself founded. The first Silicon Valley company founded by a black man was, once again, Jerry Lawson, doing things that other people hadn't done before. And Videosoft was sort of a catch-all place because Jerry had a lot of experience. They did hardware design, they did software, he made some OSs, and also some practical stuff like controller applications. Videosoft was sort of like a tech consultancy. It kind of took the experience he had working in corporate environments from Fairchild with the Channel F, as well as his experience going out and talking to customers with those application vans, and fused it together into his own thing, right? His own creation. Videosoft was open for a while. There was a brochure I was able to see in the Jerry Lawson collection that showed all of the different projects that he was working on, so a number of different games. So I mentioned the Atari 2600 came out and did a lot better in the market than the Channel F. Well, Lawson decided, okay, fine, you got that one, but I'm going to make a bunch of games for your console, right? So you can't push me out of that space entirely. And a lot of games were planned, although unfortunately only one was ever actually physically produced. It's not actually a game, although it is something else pretty extraordinary. It is a color bar generator cartridge for the Atari. And I'm not as confident about my early CRT knowledge. Yes?
Was this before or after Activision? Was he a true third-party developer for?
Yes, he was.
Or was it before or after Activision?
I believe it was before Activision.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, but again, this was the only one that was actually went all the way through the production process into physical production. So these are still floating around eBay. They're still floating around other places. I believe there was a project in the early 2000s where some enthusiasts actually finally crafted all of these games that like there were design specs for into proper cartridges that could be run on the Atari. But no,
So do you know why Activision is credited as the first third-party developer if he was developing third-party before they were?
So as long as he was, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they were first, but if he was, I think it's partly because he sort of drops out of the history right after this point, but also because this was the only product, and it's not actually a game, right? So if you're having the first developer of games, it's going to be Activision. Yeah, so that would make sense then. Okay, so maybe they just edge it out. But yeah, unfortunately, right, Jerry wanted to make games for the 2600. He was pretty passionate about it after Fairchild gave him all of that creative control. But unfortunately was only able to make this, although it was also interesting. So this effectively let you calibrate the connection between your console and the TV, but for a market price of $29.95 US dollars, instead of what was apparently the dominant professional tool, which was like $1,000 or more dollars. So once again, he sort of finds a way he finds a market, right? He finds what he believes will be a good market. And this was intended to be sort of a launch device for the company. But again, gets wrapped up in the crash of '83. And unfortunately, for a while, the video game market is sort of toxic. I ran across an article which was particularly interesting given what we know about Silicon Valley today, which said that the last thing that a Silicon Valley entrepreneur wants to invest in is high tech, which, you know, if you think about that today, that's madness. But at that point, a number of factors combined just to make video games in particular just unsellable, right? The market just collapsed, quite unfortunately, and sort of took this nascent company with it. You know, even if Activision did get there first, and if it was 79, that's probably right. You know, I kind of would have wanted to see what he made, right? Like, he did some pretty incredible things before this. I don't know. It's just the historian's sort of, you know, teary eye of like what might have been, right? But nevertheless, you know, this is Lawson as entrepreneur. And to be fair, you know, he sort of knew that this might happen, so he said that he got the entrepreneurial bug at Fairchild when he was handling all the organizing and planning for their games division, and that, you know, even if he failed tomorrow, right, in this new venture, he would say that it was worth it. And that really was him. You know, I said he wasn't in it for the money. He really wasn't. He was in it to see what he could do, to see how much he could push that envelope. Unfortunately, this envelope pushed back, but it is still part of his history. And it is still part of the broader Silicon Valley history. I mean, Lawson went to the Homebrew Computer Club, which was a place frequented by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, as well as other early Silicon Valley minds. You know, he was in the same crowd. It's just that if you look at most narratives about that crowd, he is usually missing, which I think is somewhat sad. But he was here doing this, and he said, you know, his goal has simply been to stay on the fringe of things that had never been done. And in fact, he did continue to do that. Now, stepping back a little bit in time to that 1979 date, this is something that is not very well known about him. He actually was also an aspiring writer. So in and amongst his documents at The Strong are a set of storyboards, effectively, like little short stories that he wrote that he wanted to turn into serialized television. He went so far as to send them to places like NBC, and even to join the Writers Guild, which was a requirement in order to potentially become a screenwriter for television. And he mostly was coming with science fiction stories. One called Balance that dealt with the mystery of a balance of nature, which may be called Justice, which is about an alien entity that crashes to Earth and takes control of someone and starts a mass murdering spree, which can only be stopped by a physicist who understands how the alien actually works and is controlling this guy. Pretty cool stuff. Flight 891 Delayed is about an aircraft that takes off, intersects with an alien spacecraft, and then lands on a planet that is not Earth, with the crew forced to survive on that planet and find a way home. Again, kind of nice classic sci-fi stuff. And then my personal favorite from these, My Mind the Universe, which is sort of like a cross between Beauty and the Beast and something Philip K. Dick might write, which is a story about a sort of astrally projecting genius who discovers a way to control antimatter, secludes himself in a mountain, but is wooed by the affections of a pretty young flight attendant who accidentally gets swept into his mountain cavern. It's good stuff, actually. And this was another side of him, right? There was this creativity that wanted to get out from him that didn't always find purchase in his work. This was around the time that he was working on founding Videosoft. I think there was just a lot of creative energy there that didn't have an outlet between the Fairchild years and having this new company. So unfortunately, I don't know that these went very far. I am not a historian of the Writers Guild in the US or of television here, but I understand that the rules are fairly strict, especially then, such that someone could not simply submit a manuscript and necessarily have anything happen with it. But attempt to submit it, he did. And again, he got that membership. He cared. I think the underlying goal here in presenting this to you is simply that he was creative, he cared, and he always wanted to keep trying something new. So really quickly then, how are we on time? Does anyone have the time? I don't know. 8:41. Okay. So I want to talk a little about his legacy, and then I'll pass it back to Jay to take us home. So if we're talking about Lawson as a legend, well, that means that there must be something that has come since, right? There must be reasons why you remember him. And one of those reasons is sort of his generation of this video game cartridge system. But also a couple other firsts, which are outlined in that brochure that he published from Videosoft, right? So we have the first cartridge game system. He actually created an idea for a cable TV game network where you'd plug your video game console into a TV, and then someone on their end would play a game with you and people across the country. This may sound familiar, right? We have small networked games today, right? Moderately multiplayer online games. Again, this didn't work out. It was another project that for him was sort of ahead of its time. This is a description of a rival product, the Mattel Intellivision, which was also marketed to have this feature. Lawson experienced that same kind of regret with this project, I suspect. There were a lot of ideas he had that didn't necessarily get to bear as much fruit as he would have wanted. But again, on a certain level, that was okay for him, right? He still got to try. He still got to do something. And there are a couple others. He created a TV broadcast game, an actual three-dimensional cartridge video game as well. So he was thinking kind of what could the future be in games once he started entering that space. But his legacy extends far beyond his own life, as is perhaps proper. So this is from a 2018 video that was released at GDC featuring his children. This is Karen Lawson, his daughter. Anderson Lawson, his son, is also on the video. And they spent a little time talking about his life, his work, but also how here, I believe, Microsoft instituted a grant for budding African-American game developers, people in the games industry who had not yet worked at a AAA studio, who wanted to kind of break into the industry similar to how Lawson did all those years ago, which would allow them to attend the Game Developers Conference, to network, to kind of get into that AAA space. This, I think, is important, right? It helps that Lawson's name is attached to it because, again, it's his joy was this creative process. But actually what I think I like a little more is this place, which you got me with the Activision date. I might be wrong about this date too, but I think it's 2014. This is the Gerald A. Lawson Academy. It's a STEM academy in Los Angeles. This is a picture of it from Street View. This is their website. This is the STEAM Academy. It was named after Lawson because this was meant to be, I think it's a K through 6th grade institution to help introduce kids to the world of the arts and STEM, right? It's a focused school, and I have to think, from what I've learned about Lawson, that probably he would really appreciate this place because I mentioned at the end of his career he was teaching, he was mentoring students, but as much as he was very interested in creating, he also wanted to make sure that what he created was shared with the world. And I think he probably would particularly have appreciated this as part of his legacy. New generations who can kind of tread new ground and learn to think about the world in different ways and come up with technological solutions to novel problems, right? To be ready for the world. Because if there's one thing Lawson was, it was ready for the world. Just, unfortunately, in certain ways, I think the world was not ready for him and his ideas. I'll pass it to Jay.
Thank you, Alex. So hopefully through everything that we've discussed, you at least take away that history unfortunately distilled Lawson's legacy, right? And so we've unraveled, right, so many intersections of his life. We've gone from not just Lawson as an inventor, as we all know, but also Lawson as entrepreneur. Lawson as writer, right? Which challenges the narratives that black folks are only into the consumptive practice of video game culture, right? We see here this part of the production side of it. And actually, black folks continue to do this. Do you all recognize rated M for mature? You all recognize that phrase? Yes. That's a black man behind that voice. His name is Dave Gossett. He works for the, it's called ARC, I think it's Advertising Review Council, which is under the Entertainment Software Review Board, or the ESRB, right? The people who put on the rated ETM, that, right? He actually did that because at the time, there was really no voice acting for it. So they needed a voice to do it, and he said to do it. And once, games started to make more money and the profession started to kick off, he stepped back from the role, and then game companies actually was just like, whoa, who's this? What happened to the other voice, right? So they actually wanted him back, right? And so now his voice is now shortened to just M for mature, but that's still his voice, right? And black folks still are part of the production. We actually have here at MAGFest, who I'm so excited that I'm on the panel with, Latoya Peterson. She'll be here tomorrow at 8 p.m. because I'm the moderator, and she is the co-founder of Glow Up Games. She's the chief experience officer at Glow Up Games, right? And what makes this particular case so interesting is because her gaming studio actually has, which you can download right now as we speak, Insecure, the come-up game, which is available on Android and iOS. And it's significant because it is to her admission, it is the second time HBO has allowed a property to be used for a video game. Can you guess the first one that they license off? Game of Thrones. There you go. Right. This is the only other property HBO has allowed to be turned into a video game. Right? So I want you all at least to gather that Lawson's legacy, and not just Lawson's legacy, but the legacy in which the black folks are a part of gaming history, right, has always been there, but unfortunately lost through history, lost because of not documenting just simply their names, right? The amount of people who are black, but have also the ones that led and created spaces for gaming are just lost in history, right? And hopefully what you all hear today is just a part of that new and rich understanding, right? That so many people are actually on the shoulders of Lawson, but do not know his name, right? So many people are on the precipice of doing things that they think are inventive, but actually Lawson just shows you that he created, in some ways, Xbox Live, right, before it was Xbox Live. I'm just putting it out there, right? So I just want us to all at least take away that the understanding of who is a part of games history is actually wide and varied, right? It's just, unfortunately, some of these stories, the people's names are just lost within the ether of time. But hopefully now you're walking away with an enriched understanding, not just of just Lawson as a man, but also the understanding that black joy as a creative mode of expression is a viewpoint in which black people honestly just walk into, right? Sometimes not even inspired to necessarily aspire to greatness, but simply just being who they are authentically makes them great. And that in and of itself is a radical paradigm. Thank you. All right, so we have 10 minutes, right? So if you have any questions, please feel free. Yes.
What happened to the company VideoSoft?
So unfortunately, VideoSoft went defunct. So their plan was to create licensed games, to create games that would be published on various other platforms. However, the precise point where they needed to kind of establish that market presence was when the video game industry crashed. Now, when I say crash, there actually were different crashes of the arcade industry versus the console industry versus home games that happened kind of at slightly different points in time, but taken in aggregate for our purposes here was like one big crash. And so he wasn't able to actually produce enough and kind of get that market share that would have allowed him to push the company forward. So, yeah, it folded pretty quickly, unfortunately. Yeah.
In your documentary research, did you find any like notable correspondence between him and other early pioneers like Ralph Baer or Nolan Bushnell, or did you find any other like references of them?
So
talking
interesting
about
in the papers, there's not as much, although there are actually. I think there's a letter from an academic in Eastern Europe, of all places, who was interested in some of his work. But the place where there is a sense that he must have brushed shoulders with these people, and I think knew Bushnell, is that interview that I've linked to. In it, he's pretty candid about having met these people. He even says, although Steve Wozniak disputes this, so it's an interesting case, that Wozniak at one point wanted to come work for Fairchild, applied for a job, and like Lawson interviewed him, although Wozniak says that didn't happen. So I can't say for certain. But yes, it does seem like he was rubbing shoulders with these people and knew many of them personally because he was in the same social circles, right? Like he was someone else who from very young age had been interested in tinkering with things, taking them apart, putting them back together, going to garage sales to buy people's old componentry to try to put it together in novel ways. So yes, the short answer is I think yes, he did know these people. The long answer is there are some disputes there, and I haven't gone deep into that history to know why there are those disputes, but I suspect probably he was in the same social circles, yeah. Yeah, all the way back.
I just wanted to say thanks for having this panel, and I wanted to know, is there any way I can like learn about any other episodes, like hidden figures in like this sort of space?
I'm trying to, first of all, great film. If you haven't seen Hidden Figures, watch Hidden Figures. I'm trying to answer your question, I have to think about my own research process. And to be quite honest with you, folks like Dave Gossett, I came across by accident, right? Because I was watching a documentary about the Entertainment Software Review Board, and then he came up. And I was like, what? How did I not know about this? Puts him in the presentation, right? So some of it is by accident. Other resources you can do that are documented. There is a book, I'm butchering the title, but it's like 100 Women in Gaming. It's like a thick textbook like this. You can look through that. You'll see my friend Tanya DePass, who's in there. She is the founder of I Need Diverse Games. There's also Dr. Kashana L. Gray, who is also here at MAGFest, who is getting her badge right now. She is also here. She has her panel at 6:30, so if you are free, definitely talk to her. She is also a video game researcher. Well, she's a video game researcher. She'll say other words, but she's a video game researcher. So there's that. And sometimes it's part of it is just being slightly curious enough to who is out there, because unfortunately, as I mentioned before, certain people's contributions are literally just lost in everything, right? Like, who knows, like, when EA was like in its early stages, right? Who knows if there was actually black people a part of those transactions, a part of those, right? Fundamental to our understanding of like how the game industry is now, right? For example, Sarah Bond. Do you know who Sarah Bond is? Does anyone know? Sarah Bond's the VP of Xbox, right? Big figurehead, but kind of lost in the sauce of a lot of things. So part of it is just being very curious. Who is there. Another resource you can look into is the Game Developers of Color Expo. They are in, well, because of COVID, they went online and they've stayed online. And that's a great resource to not only see other creators out there, but also indie developers, but you also see a lot of black faces in those spaces as well. And I think if you start with those, you'll end up spreading out and learning about a little bit more other people. Does this make sense so far? Game Developers of Color Expo. GDOC Expo, yeah.
And I will, oh, no, please go.
There's also a YouTube series by Crash Course of Games.
Mm-hmm.
And in the comments section, there are a lot of people who have mentioned a lot of important figures that were left out of like that series.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good place to jump off into some of the maybe lesser known.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that actually, connects well to what I was going to say, which is just that for the Benj Edwards interview, the way Benj tells it is it was a couple like chance encounters, like with Lawson, one in person at a convention, and then also looking through old documents and seeing a picture of a black man in the middle of this magazine, otherwise full of white people, and thinking, who's that, right? So, there are thankfully more and more resources out there, but unfortunately, some of the time, these dominant narratives that we all know kind of become so cemented that it becomes harder and harder to try to find what actually happened and who was actually integrally involved, unless you really do some digging. But even the will to start doing that and ask questions like that is the first step, so I think it's good.
Yes.
Kind of open-ended question. So I find it interesting that you started on like the picture like that we all know, or at least I knew, being someone over-involved in games and stuff, of him with like Atari and all that, and how that's like the most well-known thing. You think of Jerry Lawson, you think of that picture. And I recently kind of got into history and like, to simplify it, how do you think that this idea of like history, be it in gaming, black culture, and or both, as these like steps, discrete events such as like, Jerry Lawson, he invented the ROM cartridge, and then that was kind of it, as opposed to his like, process and experience throughout the field of STEM and gaming, like, does that negatively affect things? Like, why might that be a negative thing? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so... No. So I think about it. So maybe ask that last part one more time for me.
So, like, what negative things can come from
like
doing
as little compartments
these things
of like one little.
Yeah, compartmentalized events as opposed to like I grasp such now like the overall context of his experience in STEM in Silicon Valley. Even though, like, it's like a black guy invented the ROM cartridge, cool, whatever. But now I grasp and understand so much. And why would?
Yeah.
Why
so
should we know that?
I think the way I want to put it is a lot of times, and maybe some of you in school have taken history classes where you're just supposed to sort of memorize the dates and the names, right? Like what happened and when, and that's kind of what you're talking about here, right? He did this there. But my response to that is, well, why are we learning this, right? What is the learning outcome of studying history? And it's not just to know that history happened. I think we should take lessons from history, right? I think a lot of telling history is telling stories, and stories usually have a point, right? Something that we are to take from them, whether it's emotional appeal, a life lesson, getting to experience life in someone else's shoes to kind of understand our own better. And so I think the benefit of something more holistic is that you're really focusing on what it is that we want to know, that we should get out of this historical pursuit, which is not simply that this man existed, that he did these amazing things, but what can his experience tell us about how we are living today and about the experiences of others around us and how we might change those experiences for the better. This is one of the reasons I really love the Jerry Lawson Academy, right? Like that feels like that sort of holistic part of his legacy. This is a place where learning and planning for the future is happening, rather than just simply looking at these like static points in time and thinking, well, now I know that, but I don't know why I should know that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sorry if that was a weird question. Yeah, I'm sorry if that was a weird question, but I'd like to
please,
poke at academics.
Please, poke away.
Yeah.
All right, Javon informs me that we're at time. You can guess which one of us ends our classes on time and which one just kind of keeps going. But really, thank you, everyone, for coming. This was really fun, and I do hope that you learned a little bit from both of us.
Thank you all.